What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Lay, and I'm here for the Santa Clara City Library. We have a wonderful talk here with the wonderful Tamara Alvarado, longtime friend of mine. I love her so much, and I'm just grateful that she's able to share her time during COVID and social distance with us this afternoon or evening, whenever I post this up. Before we begin, we're just read a little quick bio. Before becoming the Executive Director of the Shortino Foundation, Tamara Alvarado served as the Executive Director for the School of Arts and Culture at the Mexican Heritage Plaza in East San Jose since it started in 2011. During Alvarado's leadership at the School of Arts and Culture, the school and the Mexican Heritage Plaza has earned a positive reputation for their commitment to the East San Jose communities and the excellence of their programs. Prior to her service at the school, Alvarado was the director of the Multicultural Arts Leadership Institute, which I was a part of, called MALI, at the First Act Silicon Valley before it became a program at the School of Arts and Culture. And she was also the executive director at MACLA in downtown San Jose. A traditional Aztec dancer since 1999, she is a member of Calpulli Tonalehqueh Aztec Dance and has a bachelor degree in Spanish literature from Stanford University. Without further ado, let's welcome Tamara.
Woo! Thank you, Danny. It's so good to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, I think we haven't seen each other for maybe a year or two. You know, it's we don't want to think in those terms of distance, but sometimes in our busy lives as professionals, we don't have time to stop and find each other in the ether. So. It's great to be able to see you, social distance, and talk and build right now. So I'm happy.
Right on. And I appreciate all your posts. I read them all, so I feel like I'm connected to you. So just love it.
I'm building still with my community, regardless of what's happening in the world. And as a librarian and an advocate for libraries, voices like yours, stories like yours are very important to our community. So I'm grateful to share you right now with us.
Right on.
So before we jump into it, can you just tell us how you've been doing in navigating life through the pandemic?
Yeah, well, I've been doing okay. I think all of us are doing okay, and I occasionally am doing great, and sometimes I'm not doing so great. But I'll tell you this, I've definitely learned a few skills that I did not think I was going to get. So I now know how to play Super Mario Kart.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right. And actually, I'm not too bad at Super Smash Bros.
This impressive.
Mm-hmm. So that's on the lighter side, thanks to my kids. They've also taught me, my 11-year-old taught me how to use Google Slides so that I can stay fresh. Got to stay fresh. And I've definitely been having a lot of time outdoors, that is prior to our fire season, and really just reconnecting with the plants and the air and the birds and appreciating the hawks that have moved into my neighborhood here downtown.
Oh, okay.
Wild. It's been wild to have hawks around and listening to them and seeing them. I live right next to the freeway. Like I'm downtown, like literally next to the freeway, next to fire stations, under the flight path. It's wild. So I'm doing pretty well. All of us are healthy. We're good. Thank you for asking.
See, nature is trying to find you regardless of how, civilization has paved over in concrete. It's trying to find you, speak to you, let you know that it sees you. So connections
and hawks are like, what's up, homie?
What up? Hawk.
For sure.
So, all right. So I'm glad you're doing well. So maybe you want to be able to tell us a little bit about yourself, your roots in the area, and maybe your expertise and interest in why it focuses on education and the arts.
Sure. I know we probably want to do shout outs at the end, but I'll shout out Mr. Demone Carter right now. What's up, Demone? Because he says I have about 3 origin stories and I need to focus on one. So this is for Demone. In terms of my roots, I'm a Southern California girl up until a certain point.
Right.
And then at 18, I moved up to the Bay. And so, a little over half my life, I've been now in the Bay. And he made sure that I became a Warrior fan. Once I reached a certain level of a certain number of years here in the Bay, he said, yeah, you can't be from So all that to say that coming from a small town in Southern California, Escondido, California, where I still, my mom's and cousins and fam still live there, born in LA, come up here for school, doing my undergrad at Stanford. I didn't wear shorts for a year because it was so cold here. But now I'm acclimated in many, many ways. And I found my home here in San Jose, in downtown San Jose, and East Side San Jose. This is what felt like to me in the late 90s. It felt like home. And it still does, even though at times it's hard. It's hard for it to feel like home with so many changes that have happened and how communities of color, which I'm a part of, are actively being pushed out. Mm-hmm. So my roots here, the places that grabbed me right away were places like MACLA, places like The Fuel, downtown, Chris Esparza, and that whole crew so it was really like the nightlife and the cultural work, Teatro Visión giving me a chance, Catholic Charities giving me a chance to run a youth center when I was still a kid. So what I love about San Jose, and I still love about San Jose, is that, and I may sound way Pollyanna or whatever, is that the youth, you have an opportunity. Like San Jose then and somewhat now wasn't done. It wasn't like other places that I visited. And I kind of considered like, well, can I really do anything in Oakland or San Francisco? Like, it feels like it's pretty set up, And in San Jose, it felt really open and friendly. So that's a little bit of my origin story, is that I came here and I saw myself literally like at MACLA. I was part of a theater group there, just a young person. And anyway, so I'll end it at that because I can hear Damone telling me you're saying too much.
That's how superheroes start, grateful for that first of 3 origin stories. So while, growing up here in San Jose, and going to school here, did you ever envision yourself, leading some of the South Bay's most celebrated institutions in your career, your future career, definitely? Because I've been a part of many of these organizations, okay, either as active member or as a patron, and these organizations give so much color and culture to our San Jose community, and continue to fight for that constantly. And it's amazing that you've been a director for many of them. So did you ever see yourself entertaining these roles then, or were you looking at other career choices when you were young?
Yeah, I mean, when I was young, like a kid, like under 18, I was raised in a household with my dad was a professional trumpet player. He was a musician. So there was that, right? So, and it's something that you don't really think about, like you take it for granted when you're in the house. And then later on in life, you're like, wow, like living with a professional musician, it's a different way of life. I didn't realize that other kids were not raised the way we were raised. Sometimes we were those little kids asleep in the back of the hall or whatever gig. And we weren't at every gig because some of these gigs were not for kids, some folk stuff. So there was that. And then headed out into college and post-college, I really followed my passion and my heart around the arts. As much as I'm not a great actress, but I always knew my lines and I could do my blocking and the lighting. Like technically I could handle business, right? And I loved it. I'm such a ham, that. I love a mic and the mic loves me. So I just did what I wanted to do. And I also wanted to be in service. I grew up, like I said, my dad was a musician, but my mom was the person doing that nonprofit stuff without a nonprofit. Teaching women how to drive, hustling, making sure that, she was active with her own community, how she built it. So all this to say that when I think about what opportunities I've had, it literally has been because I have followed my heart, my passion. And sometimes I know you get this, Danny, because people don't quite understand, like showing up for somebody's show and showing up for somebody's, exhibition, or just having a meal in Japantown, right? They don't understand that that's part of the work, right? That this is part of the work, that we don't get to just be consumers, but we need to be participants, right? And so I think for me, that piece around leading arts organizations that I didn't go looking for, but absolutely was part of my destiny. That I be part of what uplifts, like creating and supporting infrastructure. Because the art shows and the restaurants and the shows and the gigs and all that didn't happen just out of nothing. I used to think one of my mentors, Dr. Tamara Alvarado, I didn't understand this was a career.
Mm-hmm,
An arts
mm-hmm.
administrator. Yeah. Or to even be an organizer, or somebody who's running their own for-profit business, like Chris Esparza, right? Giant Creative Services. Yourself, all the organizing that you have done over the years to help build the fabric, right? People talk about the cultural fabric of our community. Yeah, well, we're part of the weavers.
One of the hard, and I love you that you mentioned this. One of the things I'm grateful that you mentioned is that it is a lot of hard work to, and just like your mother, you like you mentioned, we've done this work to build community because we cared, yet we did not know that we could have a career in it. I definitely did not realize I could do work or make money from what I was doing or create a community. It's the same respect for librarianship. I did not know I could be a librarian. Sometimes, especially within our own cultural communities, we're never really pushed towards that direction. We're usually pushed towards something more sustainable and safe, right? But it takes people like mentors and people like ourselves to kind of bridge that gap and brave it out to realize that anybody can do this. But we really gotta, be willing to take ourselves out of that circle of influence and try, so.
You've got to break out of the box. Like, we're supposed to be, as children of immigrants, we're supposed to be doctors, lawyers, and engineers. And you know what? Kudos to our friends and fam who've done that. My own sister, she's an attorney, and I'm so proud of her. And I'm so proud of her accomplishments. And we have to show our community that also there are other places and other, careers, and not even just careers. I say, like, our vocations and our passion, that you can also build for yourself, sure, but also build for the community, and that these are honorable professions.
I know, and another shout out to like people like Thomas Aguilar, who you used to work with and I worked with, and building the arts community and finding our own niche in our city of San Jose, besides technology and the other industries that make up this great city. But, arts are important. we got to push for that,
Yeah. If not us, who? So we have to do it.
So as a creative artist yourself, did your experience and, the perspective that you had help you push or weave your way into these roles? Or did you, kind of went through the motions, tick on extra, programs and learned schooling to get to where you're at? Because I definitely, there was no handbook, I'm sure, given to you to how to do this.
Yeah, and I think there's value to both paths, right? The whole, like, I'm going to go get a master's in nonprofit management or a master's in public administration, and also the path of building relationships through community, right? So, like I mentioned, I met Dr. Maribel Alvarez at the Fuel. Why? Because there are now friends of mine that have been friends for a long time who were putting together called the Salamanca series, which was all about civic engagement. I didn't know what civic engagement meant. I just knew that my friend Diana Sanchez said, let's go to this event at the Fuel at 4:00. There's going to be a panel. And I'm like, there's still light outside at 4, but okay, you said the drinks. Okay, so let's go have a drink. And that's where I said, oh, okay, wait a minute. There's people who are combining this work about the arts with the service part to the community. And they actually say that this is a platform, to get things done, but also to change the world. And my mind was blown. I thought, okay, so in terms of my path, it was really more about, okay, I'm going to work. There's this thing called Teatro Visión. Oh, they need some help. Okay, I'm going to help. I'm gonna be backstage. Oh, you want me to be assistant director? Oh, okay, sure. I'll be in charge of the village in a production of 20. So there is all these things that I would say to a young person, get in there, get in there and do something. Lift the boxes, run backstage, run the mics, bring in the equipment, do all those things. I did those things. I lifted things. I cleaned toilets. I did all the stuff, and I still will. Like I don't have a problem doing that. If we need to clean, we need to clean.
Right.
So, all that to say that, yes, get your master's degrees, right? I started a master's in public administration at San Jose State, but I was also in the early stages of my work at MACLA as an executive director. And boy, I had to think about that because I'm like, I'm trying to meet payroll here. Am I also trying to write a paper? So after a year and a half, I stopped out of that program and moved forward with the master's degree in arts administration that I got from MACLA, right? I cut my teeth at MACLA. I have so much gratitude for MACLA and the community there. You know, Angie, that's where I met, Angie, I had already met her prior to coming on board, and Tommy, and so many folks that I met there. I mean, I have to shout out the old school Dream Cipher crew, you know, like that, it's not Dream Cipher, but the play that had the cast of thousands that we were all, you know, a part of. So these are the things that I say to young and even older folks who are potentially looking at a shift in career. You know, our big brother Keith from the Molly class from Macoma, he had a shift in his career and shifted. Always was in the arts. He's been a musician. Shout out to Keith. And he's been a musician, but he also had this other work and then shifted full time back into the arts. And I think that that's really important too for people who are older to think, is there a way? Now, mind you, the pandemic is a whole thing, and the impact on the arts and the creative sector is enormous. And I'm reading lots of reports right now, and I know that, you know, unemployment is extremely high in the creative sector. I mean, it's high everywhere, but, you know, when you literally, our world is about being together. The arts is about, like, literally, you know, being together, like a full house at a show, an exhibition, theater, a festival, and now we can't do that. So anyways, that's a lot of commentary on a path, but anyways, there you go.
No, that's good. One of the big things we want to do is kind of frame your work, but also why this work is important, because I think a lot of people often think in terms of the arts, it can be just their first, you know, interaction or thought of arts is something entertainment, you know, wise, you know, but something we want to, as art leaders and facilitators, to tell them that art is a part of our life. It is also an important part of our lives. It's important as the air we breathe and money we have, you know, it keeps us creatively engaged, you know.
Think about how much more usage Netflix is getting right now, right? Let's just use Netflix, right? Netflix, who do you think creates all that content? Creatives, artists, thinkers, doers. You know, I mean, there's a lot of creative thinkers and doers in other sectors too. But what are people turning to? They're culinary arts, right? Everybody's making new things all of a sudden, like, oh, I can make a table now. You know, I can do all these things. And these are all things that you can't use technology for, right? You're going to bake some bread. You're going to make a new hat. You're going to make clothes, right? So this is a part where that's sort of that piece, but then there's the emotional well-being, right? That even if I've been on a few Zooms, I'm sure you have several Zooms, where we're getting onto Zoom, literally we're watching live painting. And my soul was fed. I was sitting there watching this guy painting, and we were commenting on the side and doing the thing. And I was just like, wow, and there was music playing, and we're working it out, right? It's not perfect. It's not a downtown festival with music and the birds although we got birds. But this is the thing about the arts, right? There's the intrinsic value, right? Sure, the art for art's sake, but also as a community, as humans, this is how we see ourselves. It's a reflection back to us of ourselves, our community, our society, and you need that. Humans need that.
And it's just important to, you know, highlight that right now we are all diving into creativity, you know. in every way, it keeps us engaged, and not to just forget what's happening in the world, but to know that beyond this, we're making things for the future, not really to bury us, but to make for our future, because we believe that after this, we'll come out with new skills or a new perspective, and that's very important to think about. Now, as we're talking about the arts, you were a part of, Mali, and I was a member of Class 5. We're right now at Class 12,
13, something
yeah.
crazy.
So
yeah,
the Multicultural Arts Leadership Institute. As you and Roy Hirabayashi and a bunch of other people came together to create the institute, how important was it to build other future arts leaders? What was the thought of creating an institute for arts leaders? Why did it need to happen in the first place?
The impetus was that we were tired. We were tired of being in the that was Raul Lozano, who at the time was running Teatro Visión, and Roy Hirabayashi, right, who at the time was running San Jose Taiko, and myself at MACLA. And we were tired of being the three people of color. It was one of those like ebbs and flows in community where the ebb was like, there was all this opportunity building around the downtown as the creative center for the region, under the umbrella First Act Silicon Valley with Connie Martinez. So there was all this energy. At the same time, we were individually and collectively feeling this pressure to be a part of every committee task force you can imagine. I might exaggerate, but a lot of requests that, as a person of color, that once you're kind of seen and you're visible and you have some experience, some education, it's almost like people stop looking, right? It just goes like, oh, you are the Vietnamese guy. Oh, you are the Chicana. Oh, you are the Black man. Okay. So we said, that's ridiculous. There are so many of us, and we're all pulling and we're all pushing and we're all working. So it was about, yes, in the beginning, it was saying, let's equip ourselves with the tools and the inspiration. We used to call it the nuts and bolts, and it still is nuts and bolts and inspiration to push us forward into both paid and unpaid, volunteer and paid leadership, and also to have a multi-generational experience. So many emerging, like everything's always about emerging leadership, and that's great, but that's not how our households work, right? You always have like the little nieces and nephews, little cousins, and then you've got the elders, and then you've got the middles, and that's how so we were thinking about our households. Like, what's our house like? This is how our house is. So that was the impetus, was that we said, there's a lot of leadership programs. None are focused on specifically people of color in the arts, multi-generational and free of charge. And to this day, shout out to the money for a program so that somebody can apply and not have to worry, do I have the money for this?
Yeah, I remember when I was recruited to entertain it, and I didn't know if I was, qualified. I didn't know whether that, whether this was for me, but I trusted the people who were involved in it. I believe Damone got me involved, and that's why I knew, I'm like, well, do I challenge myself now? Because I always want to continue serving the community and join this program, or do I, of course, be scared and run away? Of course, I'm not one to shy away from opportunity, which I'm grateful for, years down the line. As you've seen, because you're involved with Mali as well as the Mexican Heritage Plaza as a director, how have you seen the build of all these, current and future arts leaders in our community and their impact it has on San Jose?
Yeah. How I see it is that I see institutions, for example, everything from San Jose Taiko with Lisa and Franco, Mali played a small role. They did so much of their own internal work within the community, but we played a small role of working in that transition period of, being a support, to all involved. Or when you see things like the Mexican Heritage Plaza, and, I'll use myself as an example, you've got I don't know, I'm going to mess up the idiom or metaphor. Remember, I'm
You're
ESL, English
forgiven.
is my second language, but it's you gotta walk the walk, talk the talk. And I knew that it was time for me to move on, right? And sure, easily, I could have stayed at the plaza for 20 years. People do that, and that's okay. That's not a criticism, but if you are a co-founder of a leadership institute, you also have to show how to get out the way, right? And that's part of what I bring to the table, right? Recently, I was on the call with the Arts Commission for San Jose's Arts Commission, and I said, "Hey, older white people, thank you for your service. Can you move out of the way? And in this era, when we're thinking about racial equity, can you think about that too? The city of San Jose is establishing an Office of Racial Equity.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you need to move out of the way. I was pretty crystal clear about that. So anyways, I already forgot what your question was because now I'm ranting. But I will say that the good people on the commission, you know what? They did move out of the way. And they said, all right, the community is right. We're going to move out of the way. And so now Smita is the chair and Juan Carlos is the vice.
They're both amazing. So it's great that it's happened. And you did answer my question.
Right. And so
yeah. Oh, go on.
So looping back to that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and a self-awareness, and I think
I think I'm frozen.
Yeah, it's all
oh
good.
no, I'm back. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You don't worry about it. You're cutting in and out, but we got you on hold. Don't worry about it. Yeah, it's one of those things that we have to realize.
Well, anyways, let's move on.
Yeah, so let's talk about your current role with the Leo M. Shortino Family Foundation. Can you just tell us a little about the history of the foundation? What's its main goals and how it supports our underserved youth in Silicon Valley?
For sure. So there are not a lot of small foundations like this in the area, and there are, but they aren't visible, mm-hmm. right? There's often foundations or even donor advised funds that exist at larger foundations like Silicon Valley Community Foundation. They're not really visible to the community. So just a little bit of background there. And Mr. Shortino was he was a musician. He also, and by the way, if you hear yelling in the background, it's my son yelling at the Fortnite. It's Friday here in this year, planetary alignment, and that means Fortnite forever. I have not learned how to play Fortnite, side note, but I'm thinking as the pandemic evolves, that may be another skill I acquire. Okay, so back to the lecture at hand. So Mr. Shortino, he was a musician. He was an educator. He was also a teacher. He went to Bellarmine, local Catholic all-boys high school here. So interesting man from what I hear, because he passed in 2004, I believe. And he built himself quite enough wealth to leave behind half of it in a foundation that was formed in 2000, was more formal in 2004. He had been giving to the community to causes that were important to him, primarily through scholarships and Catholic schools, schools like Bellarmine and others. And education clearly was very important to him, and the arts. So while the portfolio is primarily education, straight ahead education, programs, after school programs and what have you, the arts, while they're not a significant part of the portfolio, there are a group of arts organizations, including the School of Arts and Culture, that have been longtime grantees of the foundation. So I would say this, the foundation, having taken it over 2 years and change ago, right? And half of the last year has been in a pandemic. What I brought to the table in terms of the foundation is to create opportunities for full transparency, for dialogue, because in my experience as being on the other side, as a grantee of many organizations, and by and large, most funders, most funding institutions treat grantees with respect, but there's always a lot of just the power dynamics are never in your favor. Right? There's the people who have the money, and then there's the people who have to ask for the money, mm-hmm. right? So that's just never a great dynamic to have. So part of what I brought to the table is that even if the foundation currently is not open to new grantees. We have not been able to increase the number of grantees that we have, but what we do have is you have me. So if you contact me and you want to talk about your organization, even though we're not in a position to make new grants, I will make time. I will make time to speak to you because this is true. I knew this was true. When I went into this job, I thought, I know these funders talk to each other, and they do. So, and I've gotten that call. Hey, Tamara, I've got a funder, I've got a donor who wants to fund arts organizations in San Jose. Who do we fund? And I'm like,
hello.
Right. And that doesn't happen like once a week, but it does happen often enough where people say, hey, what's going on in San Jose? Like, what are the hot spots? Like, where are things happening? Where are the opportunities? So it's important, right? And I do that because I also want that from other funders. Some funders are really good about that. Other funders, not so much. So what I'm trying to do is add value to the Shortino Foundation. You know, sure, take care of business with our grantee. We did some of that. We did a whole assessment around data, like how much data are we collecting? And it's a tiny organization. There's only 3 employees. I'm the only one who's full-time. Why are we collecting so much data? What are we doing with all this, right? When people could be, instead of filling out forms with lots of data, they could be out there serving the community. So I brought that to the board and they thought, okay, that makes sense. So it's a different perspective. That's what I'm bringing.
Right. And I think that's, it's good that you are bringing that perspective, because it's important that, you know, for especially people of your, in your position, they're able to find those opportunities like you did, where even though there's no new grantees coming through, there's people who are willing to donate to causes, and finding those connections and acting upon them real quickly is very important, and finding the right people to connect, because there could be missed opportunities, you know, missed chances to help organizations or people out. And it takes somebody who's already have their ear to the streets, you know, to make it happen.
For sure. Yeah, I've had my own board members call me and say, hey, you know, it's the end of the year and I want to make a contribution to organizations that are doing this, like outside of the purview, right, of the organization. And I'll say, oh, you know, what's up? Okay, yeah, here's this organization that's like, you know, Recovery Cafe, because they're newer and small, and you might not know about them, right? And just doing that work, what a privilege, you know, to have a job like this. This is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, but you made it happen. So don't be so amazed. You know, you built that pathway, and people recognize the talent that you know have to lead them in the right direction. So I think you pretty much answered my next question, because of, you know, having served almost 75 different organizations over the time of the Shortino Foundation. You know, how is the process you know, when you guys were accepting these grant applications? How competitive, and what were you looking for when they would submit?
Yeah, so Shortino only focuses in on the city of San Jose. And that actually changed when I came funder. But the foundation doesn't have Santa Clara County-wide funds. So we had to, you know, shrink that down.
Right.
So the upside of that was going back to the value add, right? Like, what value are we bringing? And we know San Jose. So let's put a stake in the ground and say, we know San Jose, we're about San Jose. Mr. Shortino was raised in Northside downtown. This is a San Jose funder. So let's be that. Let's do that and be really good at it, instead of just, you know, sort of having this very sort of spread out, you know, creating very limited impact in other cities with one grant. So in terms of competitive, I would say, you know, when we open up, which will probably won't be for another 3 years, when we open up for new, and I'm being conservative, right? I'm saying 3 because it's important for, if I was on the receiving end of this information, I want to know how much attention do I pay to this foundation versus others. So I think in terms of competition, it really is about, are you are you genuinely and authentically serving the community that you have sought out to it's like, so how authentic are you to your own mission and vision,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's going to matter. And we're from San Jose, of San Jose. This group of people, the board, the staff, we live here. Like, so there's going to be that connection of, are you known? Are you an entity that's been around? You don't have to have been around for a long time, because there are organizations that haven't been around a long, long time. You know, like look at Erin and Local Color and Trami with Chopsticks Alley. Like, these are women that are doing amazing work, and they haven't been doing that work for 20 years. It doesn't mean that that work isn't amazing and valuable to the community. So we're looking for authenticity. We're looking for, are you serving low-income children? That's really important to Mr. Shortino's legacy, and to the board and to the staff. How are you serving low-income children? By the way, most low-income children, most in San Jose, are in communities of color. They are people of color, and that is really important. So we're going through our own dialogue internally around equity and inclusion, and what does that mean? So, you know, I always tell people, I know you want to know what's important to Shortino, but just know that we are also doing our own internal work, and that people should ask us, what are you doing in terms of equity and inclusion? How are you making that known? And I just, you know, I don't want to ever put grantees or would-be grantees in the position of, you know, that whole show and tell and dog and pony show, where it's like, you know, it's okay for you to ask questions. I have an example, actually. Early on in the pandemic, Veronica Goey from the Grail Family Services, also amiga, she called and she said, what are you guys doing in light of the pandemic? It was literally like the shelter in place, maybe a day or two went by, and she called me and said, what are you guys doing? And I said, okay, all right. And what did I do? I drafted a memo, went around to the board, collected votes, so to speak, and I said, we must convert our program-specific grants to general operating support, because this is unprecedented and we need to give flexibility. So at least, if we can't give more money, at least don't make these grants that are specific to one project. No, you've got to keep that when you don't even have kids to serve. You can't go to the schools. So we did that. So be responsive, right? Anyways, more rants.
No, that's good, because that actually led into my that next question was, how has the foundation pivoted to serve the community? But as it sounds, you thus pivoted the message or the grants that you've been given out to now refocus those that money towards actionable community efforts that, you know, no longer live in a school or a small area organization, but now out into the community and has, you know, actionable results, you know. So that's very important, because I tell it's hard for you guys to shift things, you know, because everything's out of whack right now.
Yeah, so definitely being able to tell executive directors, program staff, saying, the money is for what you need it for right now. You need to pay the bills, PG&E, staff, you need to retain staff, you need to shift gears and say, look at the plaza, right? They're doing food distribution and COVID. My God, like, what an incredible story there. I've been over there for the COVID testing. You know, it's free, it's walk up, it's in the community that it serves. You know, it's not in some, you know, parking lot somewhere or some, you know, hospital where you're worried about a number of issues and things. It's in your own place. It's one of your community's spiritual homes.
Mm-hmm.
So for us to be able to say that and be present, I can't tell you how many Zooms I've been on with grantees. My job is to listen, which I'm not doing a lot of listening right now. Just doing talking.
I have your attention. That's why we're talking. So don't worry, you're doing the right thing right now. So,
okay.
So yeah, don't worry about it. So, you know, we want to know that you guys and yourself and the organization has done a lot for the community. What can the public do to help, you know, the Shortino Foundation, or, you know, in general, other organizations like Shortino, where we don't know how we can help, but what can our efforts, be called to providing for you guys?
Yeah, I think one, always hold philanthropy accountable, right? Foundations, corporations, entities that can give, hold them accountable. It's okay to ask questions. And I get that the power dynamic is not in the favor of those of us who are raising money, right? And still, it is still important, this moment that we're living in, which seems to be, it's extended. I got that phone call as a San Jose Unified parent. We will be doing distance learning through December. I was surprised they didn't say through June.
Yeah.
Right? Because that, for a number of reasons that we won't go into right now. So bottom line, hold philanthropy accountable. Small philanthropy, big philanthropy, say, hey, go online and check it out. And if you read through what, for example, Silicon Valley Community Foundation has done so much work to establish funds and get funds out to Sacred Heart Community Services and to Destination Home. They're getting money out into the community. Somos Mayfair doing all this work. They're not necessarily, Somos and Sacred Heart, not part of the philanthropic sector, but ask questions, just like Veronica Goey said, what are you going to do? Right? And then the other piece I would say is amplify what artists and arts organizations are doing in the time of I already mentioned the plaza, right? And it's everything from holding Zooms on a weekly basis and still pushing to have that creative experience online, which is hard. It's difficult. It's not easy. People get caught up with just being at home or just kind of like, oh, I got to get on that Zoom. But I think about like the Aztec dance group that I belong to, right? How do we combine, go from resilience, but into resistance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how important it is that group that I'm part of, so I'm biased, is really looking at the county guidelines and working with the School of Arts and Culture to say, how do we move forward with 60 people when we're used to having 120 every Wednesday at the plaza in close quarters because it's communal, right? But this group, Calpulli Tonalehqueh, is resilient and resistant and is saying, we will do this. We're going to follow the guidelines. We're going to be socially distant. It's weird. It's strange. It's different. So amplify those stories, right? And be present when you can, right? I talked about how important it was for us to, go to the shows and go to Japantown, go to the plaza and get tested. When you hear about a nonprofit, Conexión, they're offering, we have to model that for our community. Every time I go, I post something up and I'm just amazed at how, people will ask me like, does it hurt? Is it going to tickle my brain? And they don't go because they have this preconceived idea. Mm-hmm. So we have a responsibility to model that. And I had that same issue. I was like, oh man, I don't like to cry in public, but here we go. And it didn't hurt.
Yeah.
It was super gentle and so easy. So those are a couple of things. Amplify the stories however you can. Show up in person safely. And then also ask questions, make demands.
And that's very important to note, from understanding one's own power and being able to understand that you have a lot of power. You have a lot of opportunity to make change, especially through amplification of messages, as well as making, putting your foot on the ground and making demands that for equity, that when things are not going in a way that seems fair, and it's sometimes scary. I get a lot of people who, just like getting a swab in your nose gets scary. Yeah. You just gotta do it enough for it to be comfortable, and to understand that why you're doing it and the actions that the repercussions after you doing the action. So it's a long term practice that we have to go as citizens. Yeah,
and take a friend and make that something that I've taken friends and family to go get tested, and by the way, it is really gentle and there's no roughness, unnecessary roughness. So yeah, and then I ended up having like social time there because I saw friends or even people that we didn't know each other, but we're like going through this together. And, I locked eyes with this mom and her kids, and we were like, here we are doing the thing, and we chatted a little bit. And I had that social interaction that we're all so hungry for. Well, at least the extroverts in our lives. Anyways, blah, blah.
We just got to show up, right? Just
Yeah.
showing up. Can you tell us any projects that, are coming up, or you want to inform us, or just, initiatives looking into the end of the year or even into the future that you want to share so we can be aware of what's going on?
Yeah, well, with the foundation, like I mentioned earlier, we are doing our work internally around equity and inclusion. And, that's kind of internal facing. I would say that externally, there's a group of grantees that are in a community of practice, and we collaborate with SJ Learns and we collaborate with Cisco. And we've joined forces to include, first it was SJ Learns and the Shortino Foundation, and then we recruited Cisco to bring their grantees into this. And this is in the after school sort of area, and that's different now, right? Because after school virtually, but we're working together and trying to get more funders together to, one, create an experience for grantees where you don't have to go to 79 different meetings for different funders, and then to create a community of practice, right? Where you can actually talk to others. And especially now in a pandemic, that's pretty exciting to work with SJ Learns and the Library Foundation and Cisco. It's pretty rare, I think, to have private philanthropy, a city entity, and then a corporate entity working together. And it's, we're trying to adapt, and we're thinking about different things like design thinking and how do you break that down so it's not something you went to a workshop and then you go back to like, well, I don't have time to do that, so that's a thing. And then just my own work as a member of the Mexica community with traditional ceremony and dance and language and philosophy. Our way of life is very ceremonial. And so how do we hold that space, that ceremonial space? I've been on a Zoom rite of passage for young women. We had a Zoom, right? And it was very different, but it was so heartfelt, and I felt that it was good. But then we've also had, some of the work where I'm thinking, in San Jose, Day of the Dead is not a day; it's a whole feeling, it's a whole season. So really thinking through, like, okay, there's going to be that public. The public part of that, like public altars and altar making, is going to be really important. So anyway, so that's not an official initiative, but that's where my thoughts are right now, is ceremony. How do we maintain our cultural identity and part of what makes San Jose so special, right? Like, I know all of our New Year's in San Jose, because we don't just have one New Year, right? We have multiple New Years. We have the Mexica New Year. I know when I need to say Chukmong Nam Moy.
Yeah, we got that coming up. Then there's the Chinese New Year. Then all the other Southeast Asian New Years. There's dozens of New Years that happen throughout the year.
Passage and all the ceremonial, the marking of the seasons. So the things that we don't take for granted in San Jose, we know that makes us special. So right now, I'm just thinking a lot about that. Like, okay, how do we make that happen? Mm-hmm. And not lose, we're not going to lose who we are, right? Because our ancestors, who dealt with much more than we are, we're talking about, colonization and genocide, like, and there's definitely some issues and situations at hand in our different communities, but we are resilient for sure, and we are going to resist. So I think that the cultural work is part of our resistance.
We have to, regardless of how we're going to pivot in this future, mm-hmm. where we might have to limit the way we were celebrating.
That's right.
We have to be ready also and excited to bring it back to full power when we can do it safely. Right. Because we have to reestablish that joy, that celebration. Mm-hmm. And that's the most important thing, to reestablish it for the next generation.
Joy. Joy is so important that, there's been a lot of conversation about Black joy, And I think that's really important. And I've been, looking at that and reading that and just really, kind of reflecting on that and how important that is for it. And this is part of the Mali, conversation, right? That so much of the conversation around race has been in some places is still all about response to white people and white culture and white supremacy, right? But there's a conversation that communities of color also need to be having with each other. And that's a very different conversation, but important. So anyways, thank you for bringing up Joy.
Of course, always.
Yeah.
Well, how can people find you, and any last shout outs that you'd like to give before we end this?
Yeah. People can find me on the Facebook, on Twitter. I think my handle is talvarado2040. I do check it upon occasion. I do check the dumpster fire in Twitter. It's fun. And I'm on Instagram. And if people want to contact me, they can definitely, I think my email is on our website for Shortino. And definitely we can set up a Zoom, no problem. And then shout outs, of course, all my Mali fam, the School of Arts and Culture fam, holding it down with, keeping us safe, keeping us fed, and MACLA fam, Catholic Charities fam. So my Calpulli Tonalehqueh fam, holding it down, making sure that we're there for the community always. And I'm so appreciative, Danny. I'm so appreciative of what you do. Really appreciative. And I'm just looking forward to seeing what your next steps are.
There's a lot of them, so watch for them, all of them. But if it wasn't for people like you, I don't know where I would be. But that's why I'm so grateful to be able to connect with you. As a friend, you're my mentor. You're everything that I hope to emulate in my own future. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this talk. Once again, support organizations that support the community, support your libraries. We're doing our best to serve you regardless of what's going out there. Know that we are doing our best to get the materials, the resources, and the care that you need. Just be patient with us while we sort things out. Please be safe, take care of one another, mask up, social distance, but connect with your community, because we still need to create that dialogue of storytelling. And that's very important. All right, everybody, have a good one. Peace.